That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
Oh, no tears, please. It's a waste of good suffering.
Fairly alarmed here.
Welcome to the MOTN-Quisition, where we here in the court of the Nerdiverse hold some of your favorite pop culture characters in contempt and make them stand trial based upon their own pop culture representation. Now, as you've seen on the title of this video, we're actually speaking about one in question that has affected the hearts and minds of adults to children to the elderly to cats, dogs living together in mass hysteria since his inception. And of course, I am talking about none other than your favorite friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Now, how this show goes is that I will actually pit two forms of media against each other to see which one better represents the sole core of the source material of this character. Spider-Man originated in Marvel Comics in 1962, so we're going to be holding his film adaptations against his video game adaptations. Which one does it right better? That's what we're going to be deciding here today on the MOTN-Quisition. First on our list for the MOTN-Quisition are the films of Spider-Man. Spider-Man has appeared in 10 live-action films since he spun his first web, and we're going to put them to the test. I would say the bulk of Spider-Man's film image has been broken down into three primary trilogies going forward to today. These would be the Sam Raimi trilogy, the Mark Webb reboot adaptation, and the current Marvel Cinematic Universe adaptation. Let's go over the pros and cons of each. Let's start with the 2002 interpretation of Spider-Man directed by Sam Raimi. I would say that the biggest pro of the Raimi trilogy was the on-point representation of Peter Parker / Spider-Man by one Tobey Maguire. Across three films, the Sam Raimi trilogy never gave us a moment to breathe, and also at the same time made Spider-Man a household name. I would say the primary con of the entire trilogy, unfortunately, was the rest of the supporting cast. While Tobey Maguire held the lion's share of screen time as Spider-Man, one cannot pass the supporting cast, which had hit or miss plot development and representation through their acting. Now, there are noticeable standouts from the supporting cast, such as J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson, and some would say Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin. But there were some casting choices that left much to be desired. We're looking at you, Mary Jane Watson. So all in all, I would say the 2002 trilogy was a great adaptation of the character, while still bumpy in places such as villain development, character development, and overall story synergy, unfortunately, because it ended with Spider-Man 3. Next, I would like to go into the Mark Webb series, the two-part full story of his envisioning of Spider-Man. This would include the Amazing Spider-Man film, and also the Amazing Spider-Man 2. I would say the biggest pro of this series was providing a fresh new story for Peter Parker. At this time, there was some franchise fatigue due to the way that Spider-Man 3 was handled by its parent company, Sony, which currently owns the rights to Spider-Man film content. Mark Webb then took this opportunity to give us a new view on the web slinger, more to his story and what you thought was the origin of Spider-Man. Taking some inspiration from the Ultimate Spider-Man run of comic books, we delve into the circumstances surrounding the death of Peter Parker's parents and how him becoming Spider-Man may have not been up to circumstance and coincidence. So I would say the biggest pro is definitely this brought to light new shadows that were hidden within the Spider-Man lore that most fans may not have been aware of, and gave a fresh coat of paint to this character. I would say the biggest con of the Mark Webb trilogy unfortunately, was that there was too many chefs stirring the pot. At the time, Sony had big aspirations for Spider-Man film franchises to explode and to become more along the lines of the newly minted Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, for the Spider-Man sequel, Amazing Spider-Man 2, there were multiple plot lines, multiple villains, and multiple ways to create their own extended universe. This caused much confusion within the plot and caused the actual film to suffer. This was the nail in the coffin of the Amazing Spider-Man non-trilogy. Marvel Studios and Sony Pictures combined to ensure fans that Spider-Man was finally coming home, and thus was born the new version of Peter Parker that we have today. Across 3 films currently, being Spider-Man Homecoming, Captain America Civil War, and Avengers Infinity War, we have received very little information on our new wall crawler. I would say the biggest pro of this new Spider-Man is the portrayal from young Tom Holland, who plays the titular hero Spider-Man. Tom Holland's performance as a young wall crawler, finding his own way to do what is right, has stolen the hearts of Spider-Man fans the world over. Though this series is young, I would say that the only con that I can find with his portrayal of the wall crawler up until this point is that he has not been able to live up to the full mantle of being Spider-Man. Being a young hero has its perks, but it also has its drawbacks in regards to the abilities that we know Spider-Man to perform. To quote Tony Stark, he has to stay low to the ground, and his villains have yet to be fully realized. Though the great cinematic performance of Michael Keaton as Vulture, there is still much to be shown for this new wall crawler to really stick the landing. Overall, I believe that the film versions of Spider-Man have been more than a half measure. They have always given us a great look into the character of Peter Parker and how he has internalized this responsibility to be a hero. Though his supporting cast may have suffered throughout these films, they still represent a strong young character that we all can rally behind. Now let's talk about the video games, shall we? Since this character's creation, Spider-Man has been featured in numerous video games spanning 15 gaming platforms. Today, we're only going to discuss 3 games that best represent the old webhead. These games will include Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, Ultimate Spider-Man, and the 2018 blockbuster PS4's Marvel's Spider-Man. How do the video games of old stand up to represent Spider-Man in this court of MOTN? Let's find out. Let's talk about Shattered Dimensions. Debuting in 2010, Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions was a virtual love letter to all things Spider-Man. Over the years, Spider-Man has had multiple interpretations, and over the years, this game has perfectly captured the experiences of these alternate versions of the character. Voiced by past Spider-Man voice actors, through television and cartoon adaptations, you are able to play as 4 versions of the wall crawler. These versions include playing as the Amazing Spider-Man, the futuristic Spider-Man of the year 2099, the mysterious version of Spider-Man Noir, and the updated rendition of the Ultimate Spider-Man. Each version providing a different playstyle and aesthetic that made the game a must-have for all lovers of the wall crawler. The major con I would give for this game is that we're not giving enough time to actually get to know these alternate versions of the character. Each of these versions has their own deep, rich tapestry of history and stories that can fill an entire game on their own. It just leaves me wanting more when I play these characters that much less. Now, let's look into the PlayStation 2 version of the Ultimate Spider-Man. I would say the biggest pro of this game is the balance between the titular Spider-Man character and being able to play as, for the very first time, Venom, who has been shown to be his dark, doppelganger, as it were. This game is a 2005 interpretation of the Ultimate Spider-Man comic written by Brian Michael Bendis and art done by Mark Bagley. In this game, you're given control of the Ultimate Spider-Man and his dark reflection, Venom, each providing a different playstyle and storyline that best tells the tale of Peter Parker's internal struggle with the black suit and the consequences of his actions. I would say that one of the major cons of this game, given the time, was the repetitive gameplay and the unimaginative story progression. Though this was a faithful telling of the Ultimate Comics version of Spider-Man, the game progression and storyline was made this game less than perfect. Introductions to these characters, as well as cameos from other Marvel heroes, did liven the actual gameplay, but the overall story and ending did more harm than good. In 2018, we received a Sony exclusive Spider-Man game called Marvel's Spider-Man. From the mastered swinging mechanics to the captivating storyline, this game is the combined efforts of decades of storytelling and game mechanics. Though the game does take some liberties with the story and the character himself, nothing quite captures the heart and soul of what Spider-Man represents like this game. I would say that 2018 Spider-Man is very well quite perfect. The major con I would give this game is, without spoiling most of the storyline, is that some of the side missions can weigh down the actual action and progression of the story. Though it is hard to find flaws in this gem, there are some errors that can be corrected. So, as I was mentioning earlier, there are some stealth missions, I will say, that really drag down the story, as well as drag down the momentum of the game, which is why it keeps it from being absolutely perfect. Overall, I feel that the 2018 version of Spider-Man and the PS4 game perfectly give us the feeling of being Spider-Man and also tells us a great story of power and responsibility. So what's the verdict? Given the evidence brought to the court of the Nerdiverse, we find that the more accurate interpretation of the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man is the video games. The tipping point of this decision was the recent retelling of 2018 Spider-Man game. Nothing quite captures the fun, exciting, impulse-pounding adventure of being Spider-Man while showing his strong, noble, and heart-wrenching moments it takes to be Spider-Man. With great power does come with great responsibility. And overall, the video games have taken the responsibility to do the web slinger justice. If you disagree with our choice, please let us know on iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, SoundCloud, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Google Play. Please remember to leave a like if you like this content, and let us know which character you would like to be brought in for the Inquisition. And definitely subscribe if you would like to hear more information, receive more content, and keep in touch with the masters of the Nerdiverse. I have been, of course, Mike G, and I will always ask you to never expect the MOTN-Quisition.